George and Kim. Thank you very much for that.
I can't imagine anyone better to welcome here to Churchtown Dairy than Judy Wicks. Judy has dedicated her life as an entrepreneur, an author, a speaker, and a mentor to working to build a more compassionate, environmentally sustainable, locally based, and I believe she would say beautiful economy. After graduating from college in 1969, Judy spent a year living in a remote Alaskan Eskimo village. Here she says she had the transformative experience of living in a culture based on sharing and cooperation. This experience informed the way in which Judy did business as the owner and operator of Philadelphia's White Dog Cafe, which she founded in 1983 on the first floor of her home. After helping to save her block of Victorian brownstones from demolition to make way for a proposed mall of chain stores, she grew what she began as a tiny muffin shop into a 200-seat restaurant featuring fresh local food. Over the years, White Dog grew a national reputation for community engagement, environmental stewardship, and responsible business practices. In 2009, Judy sold the company through a unique exit strategy that preserves the White Dog's sustainable practices and maintains local independent ownership. Under Judy's leadership, the White Dog became a leader in the local food movement, purchasing sustainably grown produce from local family farmers, and only humanely and naturally raised meat, poultry, eggs, sustainably harvested fish, and fair trade coffee, tea, chocolate, vanilla, and the all-important cinnamon. Other business practices she implemented at White Dog include the paying of a living wage, mentoring inner-city high school students, recycling and composting, solar-heated hot water, using eco-friendly soaps and office supplies, and purchasing 100% of the White Dog's electricity from renewable resources. And the White Dog was the first business in Pennsylvania to do this. In the 1990s, Judy worked with the Zapatista revolutionaries in Chiapas, Mexico, to set up a fair trade coffee venture. And her experiences working with small farmers in Chiapas, as well as at home in Pennsylvania, evolved her vision of a global economy comprised of a network of self-reliant and sustainable local economies connected by small-to-small fair trade relationships. In working toward this vision for self-reliant local communities, in 2001 she founded the Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia and co-founded the International Business Alliance for Local Living Economies, or BALI. BALI envisions an economy that provides for the needs of all people while working in harmony with natural systems, and now includes some 30,000 local independent businesses in the United States and Canada. Judy is the author of the award-winning book, Good Morning, Beautiful Business, The Unexpected Journey of an Activist, Entrepreneur, and Local Economy Pioneer. And I first came across Judy's work in 2013 when I was working on the development of Camp Hill Hudson, and a dear friend of mine gave me this book, and I have to say I devoured it. It's an amazing book, and it's a personal account, and it's filled with the joys and the struggles of the development of the White Dog Cafe, but also underscores the principles of running a responsible, beautiful, and I would call it a human local enterprise. Judy states in her book that one of her guiding principles is that business is not about money, it's about relationships. And in working to put Judy's principles into practice, I found that building relationships with employees, with contractors and suppliers, with those we were serving, and with the community at large, was not only good for me and for my soul, but also was good for business. And in that way, I'm very pleased to personally be able to welcome Judy Wicks.
That great introduction. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you to Abby to be here in this barn. It's not even like a barn, you know. It's like a church, and this is where they keep the holy cows, I think. So I'm just so enjoying this this visit. I spent the night last night at the Hawthorne Valley with Martin and Janine, and there's just such a, Janine said, come look, the cows are going out to pasture, and I'm standing in the window just watching them go along to pasture, and I just felt such a sense of peace here. And I feel like part of it is just the harmonious relationship that the people have with the land that gives a sense of calmness and peace that you can feel. So I always love my trips to Hawthorne Valley and to the Hudson Valley in general. And I had the delight of seeing Hudson Hemp today. Abby took me on a tour, and oh my gosh, I'm going to talk a little bit about our hemp project, but what's going on here puts us to shame. I'm going to bring my crew. They said we could come to visit and learn, and so that'll be great. And so many people here I know. It's so great. I just met a woman who met my parents 30 years ago, and my parents have been dead for 25, and well, maybe it was 40 years ago you saw them, or maybe 50. I don't know, but anyway, she was talking about my father picking corn in the family garden, and oh, it just brought back such great memories. So thank you for telling me that story, and lots of friends here from all over. So thanks everyone for being here. So, you know, I've been just stressed about this divide between urban and rural communities that's become worse, of course, under the current administration. And it's just so sad to see. And it hasn't always been that way. It's not that long ago that urban and rural communities co-created regional economies that were based really on mutual respect and trust. The cities and towns were connected by local supply chains that brought basic needs to market and created a local self-reliance. So the prosperity and even the survival of the population depended on this partnership between rural and urban communities. So that all ended with corporate globalization. And then, you know, as we all know, things changed, and foreign goods that were made with cheap labor were brought to our communities, putting out of business our manufacturing industry, putting out of business many of our farmers. What's happened to the farmland in much of the country is just so sad. You planted in monocrops, you know, fence post to fence post. Rural towns have been decimated, and there's just such sadness. And people who used to take great pride in feeding their region or manufacturing products that their region needed were out of work. And when you look to see where the opioid crisis is today, it's in those exact places, the rural farmlands that used to feed their regions and the urban areas that used to have manufacturing. So, you know, I've been thinking about how we could change all that. So today, I want to talk about my new organization, All Together Now, which is working to unite rural and urban communities in my state of Pennsylvania. But I'm going to start off with a little bit about my story. You heard some of it from Cam already. But one of the things that I realized is that how much of my life has been inspired and guided by Native American people. And that first began in 1969 when I graduated from college and lived with Eskimos in Alaska in a very remote village. And as Cam mentioned, that's where I witnessed a different way of living that was based on cooperation and sharing. One morning I heard a knock on my door, and I opened it to see an Eskimo woman who was saying, "Seal party, seal party." And I looked out and I saw all the women in the village carrying these buckets across the snow. And I followed along to find that the tradition is that after a man catches his first seal after a long, hard winter, his wife has a seal party. And all the meat is distributed equally between all the families. And then anything else that the families accumulated during the year that they don't need for survival is also shared. And it ends with throwing hard candy and bubblegum up into the air. And that's what they're doing there is catching the... I was right in there as well. It was great fun, but it really exemplifies their philosophy of sharing. That the idea of hoarding more than you need was unthinkable, and the idea of envy just didn't exist. If you admire something an Eskimo has, I say to you, I love that scarf you're wearing. If you're an Eskimo, you'd give it to me. So you have to watch out when you admire around them. No, please don't. I've had that happen to me before. I have a whole closet full of it. Anyway, when I think about it in contrast with my own culture, our culture, where our economy is really based on envy. Advertising tries to get us to be envious, of the models or whatever, and so we always want more, more, and more. We're never satisfied, and we've lost this sense that Indigenous people have of reciprocity, that you give back everything you give. That it's a flow. It's like breathing in and out, that creates the balance of life in so many different ways. And as a culture, we've taken more from the earth than we give. And we actually reward and look up to people that take more, that accumulate more, that have the biggest houses, whatever. I heard that Confucius once said that all of his teachings can be consolidated into one word, reciprocity. And that's so true. So the Eskimos who lived below poverty in our standards were actually the happiest people I've ever met. And their self-worth was not based on material possessions. They had a sense of belonging to this world. They understood their place in the web of life. They had a harmonious, reciprocal relationships with each other and with Earth. So it wasn't belongings that made the most value for them. It was a sense of belonging that made them so happy. So here's a picture of the White Dog Cafe. As Cam mentioned, I started in 1983 on the first floor of my house, where I lived for almost 40 years. I'm a very place-based person. I don't move very often. I raised my family above the shop, the old-fashioned way of doing business, and I think that really living above the shop really influenced my business philosophy because I saw every day people that were affected by my decisions, my employees, my customers, my suppliers, my environment, my neighborhood, and so on. And so I think that it helped to have me make decisions that were in the common good. So I could talk forever just about the White Dog, but I wanted to just tell 3 stories that were most important to me. Let's see, well, I'll just go through them. The first is about reimagining growth. So this is the mantra that we hear in the business world, grow or die. You have to keep growing bigger and bigger, and of course, if you are a publicly traded company, you have to. And this is basically destroying a world that has limits for growth. So in the beginning, I would feel inferior when people say, well, how many businesses do you have, how many cafes do you have? And I'd say, well, just one, But I realized that if I were to start a chain or have more than one business, that I would lose what was most valuable to me. And that was the relationships I had, with my staff, my customers, my suppliers, and so on. So instead of starting a White Dog Cafe in someone else's community, I started a Black Cat in my own. A retail store next door that sold locally made products and fair trade products. So then I started thinking about all the non-material ways that you can grow, to really reimagine growth, to increase knowledge, expand consciousness, deepen relationships, develop creativity, build community, and have more fun. So at the White Dog, that's exactly what we did. This is a picture of one of our events, the Dance of the Ripe Tomatoes. That's Farmer Glenn, and I made those ripe tomatoes. I was showing the kids last night. By the way, I just had such a great time with the Place Corps, the first cohort, and it's such a marvelous program at Hawthorne Valley. And some of the students are here. In fact, all of them may be there. They are. Hi, everybody. And it's just so inspiring to be around these young people. It really gives me hope, for the future. Anyway, I was telling them the story about how I made the tomatoes out of red satin bed sheets I'd gotten as a bridal shower or whatever. Made little faces with felt, and the legs were, I took broomsticks and sawed them to make the knee joint, and then we hung them up, and anyway, that was a whole event. And I had other events. We used to have for 20 years, we had a Native American Thanksgiving dinner where we had Native people come and speak. We honored the Lenapes, who were the original people of our area, and talked about and gave thanks for all the foods in our diet that were originally cultivated by Native Americans long before we were here. So again, I could go on forever about the white dog, but I need to move on so I can tell you about what I'm doing now. I started seeing that chain stores were like invasive species that go into other people's communities and smother out, the indigenous businesses. So then I thought, well, then what's the healthy way to grow? We do have to grow in some way. Well, how does nature grow? Well, I realized that nature grows deeper in place. That nature grows to become more diverse, more creative, more resilient, more adaptive to the needs of the ecosystem. And that's just how we can grow our businesses. What do our communities need? What kind of businesses do we need to create in order to have more resilient economies and communities? And this doesn't mean that all the businesses need to be mom and pops. Am I seeing the waveless? That there's such a thing in nature as the mother tree. That's bigger than others, and under the ground, nutrients are sent out to the other trees and plants in the area. And one of my favorite mother trees and examples of growing deep is Ingerman's Deli in Ann Arbor, Michigan. The deli there on the left, it could have easily been a national chain, very famous place, but instead of starting a chain, they looked to see what their local economy needed and started a bakery, a creamery, a coffee roasting business, and 8 more businesses. So they have a total sales of 65 million. It's probably higher now. I don't know how many years ago I put this up there, but in doing that, they're reducing imports and increasing local self-reliance by producing their products locally, and they spread more ownership more broadly because they invited their top employees to become owners in each of the new businesses that they started. So the next lesson from the white dog is protecting what you love. So here's a picture of the Poconos. I actually drove here from the Poconos. I have a cabin up there that I've had for 20 years, and I just loved, driving across the Delaware River and then across the Hudson River and these great vistas and so on. But I love this, I call it the Wiki Wacky Woods, my little place, my little paradise. So back around 1999, there was a terrible drought, and I can remember driving up to the woods and seeing how the cornfields on either side of the road were all dried up and being plowed under. And then I got to my little piece of paradise and was walking through the woods and saw that the ferns on Fern Hill, that usually are big, luscious green ferns waving in the breeze, were all shriveled up like brown tissue paper on the floor of the forest. And as I walked along, there was just the crackling of sticks and dried leaves and just an eerie silence, not even the birds were singing. And the fear of fire, was in the air. And all of a sudden, I just got it. So this is like 20 years ago, and I thought, this is what climate change is about, that parts of the world are going to have droughts and fires, and other parts are going to have storms and floods, and of course we've seen that that's what has happened. So that's when I became a tree hugger. I found a big oak tree, and I went over and I hugged this oak tree, pressed my face against the bark, and promised I would go back to Philadelphia to sign up for renewable energy. Which we did, and as Cam mentioned, we were the first business in Pennsylvania to buy 100% of our electricity from renewable sources. But I realized that, I knew about climate change before this. We actually had a speaker at the White Dog on climate change. I knew that you could sign up for renewable energy. So intellectually, in my head, I knew all this stuff, but I had to be touched with my heart in order to take action and change. So I realized that that's the key to all this in terms of, getting people to react and deal with climate change. We have to bring it home to open hearts. So here are Judy and Mark Dornstrike, and I just met someone here tonight who knows them. There she is, whose friends. Mark has passed away now, but they were one of the chief suppliers to the White Dog Cafe from Branch Creek Farm. And Mark once told me that good farming is the balance between masculine energies and feminine energies. That if you have too much masculine energy, which he equates with efficiency, so if you're too efficient, then you're not going to have enough feminine energy, which is he characterizes as nurturing. You'll have a well-run farm, but you won't have great tomatoes. On the other hand, if you have too much feminine energy and not enough masculine, you might have great tomatoes, but you're going to go out of business because you don't know how to use your time, in a wise way. So it occurred to me that our industrial food system is all about masculine energy, about efficiency, is all about How little space can we give those hens? How little light and air can we give them in order to get the cheapest egg possible? That's what it's all about. So of course we switched to all pastured chicken and eggs, which you all know about up here. This was a long time ago when this was rare. And then I found out about the horrors of the factory farming of pigs, which just stunned me that these mother pigs were kept in this way. And I won't bother to explain the situation because I'm sure you all know about how horrible this system is. And I realized with horror that the pork that I was buying for my cafe must come from the system, because if you don't know otherwise, that's how pork is raised in this country in the industrial system. And so it's such a breach of our stewardship to treat animals in this way. So I just came to the kitchen and said, we have to take all the pork off the menu, the bacon, the ham, the pork chops and so on, until we can find a sustainable source, which we did in Lancaster County. And this is how the pigs like to sleep in pig piles in the mud and so on. And then I found out about the plague of the cow and started buying all grass-fed beef. I couldn't even find 100% grass-fed beef at the time. And I talked to Bill Elkins, who had this herd of Angus, and I asked if he would not corn finish my steers, which he gladly did because he wanted to experiment himself. And so we ended up making a burger we called Buck Hill's Burger that was 100% grass-fed. And Patti LaBelle, the singer, used to drive over with her limousine or whatever, and the chauffeur would run in to pick her up a Buck's Run 100% grass-fed burger. So anyway, I finally got to the point where I was very proud of my menu. I thought, now we've done it. Well, all of our sources are for meats and meat products come from small family farms where the animals are treated kindly. This is a doggy where we got our goat cheese, and she said that when she kisses her goat's ears, it makes the cheese better. I'm sure that's true. So, I thought, well, gee, we're the only restaurant in town that's doing this. This is our market niche. This is our competitive advantage. This is all about us. And then I had this transformational moment where I thought to myself, well, if you really do care about the farm animals, if you really do care about the farmers who are being driven out of business by the CAFOs, if you really care about the workers in these horrible conditions in slaughterhouses and whatnot, if you care about the environment that's being polluted by the concentration of manure, and if you care about the consumers that are eating meat that's laced with hormones and antibiotics and whatnot, then rather than keeping this as your market niche, you'll share this information with your competitors. So that was my real turning point, because I realized that there is no such thing as one sustainable business, no matter how good your practices are, that we can only be part of a sustainable system, and that we have to work in cooperation to build that system. So although the White Dog had all these great practices that Cam rattled off that we do for the environment, and it was, and we had a network of farmers that supplied us, that was enough. I thought that was enough, but then I realized, no, it's not enough, that we have to build a whole system with these values and try to feed the whole region. So I asked the farmer, we were buying 2 pigs a week at the time and using the entire pig, making sausage and sliders for the bar and whatnot. And so I asked the farmer who was bringing us in the 2 pigs a week, would you like more customers? And he said yes, and I said, well, why don't you, I can get you more customers. He said, well, he can't because he needed a refrigerated truck in order to bring meat into town and deliver it to everyone. So I loaned him $30,000 and he bought the truck. I paid it back, this was a long time ago. And then I started the White Dog Cafe Foundation. Oops, did I miss the slide? Oh, there we go. I started the truck, right? Yeah, okay. So then I started the White Dog Cafe Foundation and started putting 20% of my profits into the foundation, and started a sustainable business network, and then Fair Food. Fair Food gave free consulting to chefs to teach them how to buy from farmers. I didn't want to go around as the owner of the White Dog to tell the restaurants what to do, so I started the nonprofit so they could do that. And then we published a local food guide as well. So this whole lesson to me was about moving from me to we. That we need to move from individualism, which is so much a part of the American character, the tough cowboy out there, to community and to building a community self-reliance. That, like I said, there's no such thing as individual self-reliance. We have to build community self-reliance. And we have to move from competition to cooperation, from, like the Eskimos, from hoarding to sharing, and from fear of not having enough for ourselves to love. So a big lesson I learned was from the Zapatistas. Kim mentioned that I worked down there for about 10 years helping the Zapatistas develop an economy with their coffee and so on and honey. And you know, I learned from them that what their uprising was about, that they did not want to become part of the global economy, that they were being pushed by the government into, you know, off their land. They wanted workers to work in the maquiladoras and so on. And they wanted to, you know, maintain their culture and dress in the way they've always dressed and not be, and teach their children, you know, in their traditions and in their own language, and not be forced to work in the maquiladoras. So that was really at the heart, you know, of the revolution, was this, they wanted to have autonomy, they wanted to have, they didn't want to be lost in the Western global culture. They wanted to maintain their local self-reliance. And I realized that the farmers in Chiapas that were fighting to have local self-reliance were also similar to what was happening at home in Pennsylvania. Our farmers were being threatened by big ag as well, being pushed out, and by, of course, development. That was so much of our beautiful farmland is paved over for housing developments of McMansions and whatnot. So, but it was this experience with the Zapatistas that I really started to think about local self-reliance, that I hadn't really thought about that before, because we have everything we want, we just go to the store and get whatever we want, or get it online, and I never thought about it before. And I realized that around the world we were losing our self-reliance because of corporate globalization, and that the cry of the Zapatistas, no más, no more of this, was really the cry for all of our communities to redevelop our own self-reliance and not be dependent on corporate supply chains. So I just came up with a simple thought that a sustainable global economy is a network of sustainable local economies. It's just so simple to me, and that we had to work on developing those sustainable local economies. And it didn't mean that we wouldn't have global trade. Of course, we want to try some other community's cheese, or another fashion from another place, or trade our wines, or whatever. That's going to be what humans will always do. But we want to produce our basic needs locally, and that's so important nowadays. So this concept gave me the idea, you know, to start Bali and a Sustainable Business Network and so on, and I wrote a book and sold the restaurant, and I wanted to spend full time working on my nonprofit work. That's the main reason I sold the White Dog after 26 years. So another time that I was so influenced by Indigenous people was Standing Rock. And so I went there in 2016 and brought 30 people from all around the country. Actually, my son came from California, and I had a pig farmer from Iowa, and 30 of us came there for Thanksgiving and cooked Thanksgiving dinner for the water protectors in Standing Rock. And it was just the most amazing experience to be in the camps there, you know, there was 200 indigenous tribes represented from Alaska to Argentina. And they had all their flags along this road. And you know, we were given training when we arrived in the philosophy, you know, of living together there. But there was this, they were just demonstrating the way to live. Everything you wanted was given to you, just like the Eskimos. You know, if you wanted a cup of coffee, there was free coffee. If you needed a hand warmer or a hat or something, you went into this big tent, and there was all these supplies. A lot of them were sent by others who were supporting this movement. But there's just this energy there that was just remarkable feeling of being in a community that was based on sharing and love. And the elders would say that to the policemen and the pipeliners that they were fighting for their kids too. Fighting to stop this pipeline, DAPL, Dakota Access Pipeline, that was headed towards the Missouri River and was to go under it, and they were trying to save it off. But this picture I adore. I actually bought this photograph from the photographer and have a big blow up in my living room at home, because it so symbolizes, I feel like, what's going on at Standing Rock, but also what's going on right now in the country, of these two world views that are coming in clash with each other. a worldview of domination of the fossil fuel industry and the militarism and so on that goes along with that, and the culture of cooperation and love, and so simply symbolized in this photograph. And while I was there, and I wanted to say that when there was a lot of violence there, of course, the military against the indigenous people who were unarmed, of course, and we witnessed some of that, and people would be injured with these rubber bullets and tear gas and whatnot, and the elders would have a forgiveness procession after someone was hurt, to go past the sheriff's office to show forgiveness, and make sure they understood that they were fighting for their children too. So there's a Lakota prophecy, a 1,000-year-old prophecy, that says that a black snake will come up out of the ground and move across the land, causing great hardship and destruction. And that they think that after 1,000 years that this snake has arrived in the form of pipelines in the fossil fuel industry. And that if the world's people do not come together to defeat the black snake, that the world will end. So I think that's where we are right now. So when we left, the elders told us, when you get home to your own communities, find the black snake and help slay the black snake. So when I got home to Pennsylvania, I realized that the black snake in our state is fracking. In New York, you guys have a ban against it, which is fabulous. I wish we could do that in Pennsylvania. So this is in Dimmock. I went to visit the town of Dimmock, whose the water was contaminated by the fracking. There's all kinds of poisons in fracking that goes into the water, and people are really sick all across the state, where the Appalachian mountains go across from Pittsburgh up to Dimmock in the Northeast. So it's really heartbreaking. And then there's the pipelines themselves, going highly explosive gas pipelines going right by someone's house. I mean, how could you sleep at night? And it's just, there's a huge fight going on about this. And then, of course, in the farmland, this is Lancaster County, beautiful farmland, these pipes going through, and knocking the trees down. I mean, it's just so upsetting to me. And so I found this group called Lancaster Against Pipelines. And when I went there and started looking at their literature, I almost cried, because it was so much like Standing Rock, that the philosophy of coming from a place of love, not anger or hate, but protecting what they loved, their land. And it turned out that one of the organizers had been to Standing Rock. So it's amazing to me, the influence of Standing Rock, how it's spread through so many communities, and so many people have been influenced by it. But anyway, I joined them, and I took civil disobedience training, and we ganged up and closed down this drill rig that was going to be drilling under a river in Lancaster County on indigenous indigenous grounds. So we became the Drill Rig 5 after our arrest. And here's me being hauled off. And then, I realized that here I'm meeting all these great people who are putting so much of their time and energy, into fighting this horror of fracking. And yet it was going on, continuing to go on, and that the political establishment was not helping. They go to there's the governor and the state senators and so on, and asking for help, but everybody sided with the fracking companies, with the fossil fuel industry. So I started a movement called Proud Pennsylvania to elect candidates who signed a pledge not to take money from the fossil fuel industry. And they're in favor of keeping water publicly owned and not privatized. They're in favor of the rights of communities to stop the CAFOs from coming into their communities, and all the good stuff. And so we endorsed 14 candidates, and I'm the local chair of the Food and Water Action PAC, which is a PAC to raise money. So we raised money for our candidates. We had endorsed 14, and 8 won. So now we're the Proud Pennsylvania Legislative Working Group, and we go to Harrisburg to advocate for policies and have a group that are on our side, and we're hoping we'll get more as we move along. And there's more. We're keeping the group small for a working group, but we have a lot more allies in the State House. So that led me to start all together now, Pennsylvania, uniting urban and rural communities. This is still in the early stages, but I'm going to tell you what we've been doing so far. The reason we're doing this is to move power and wealth, from corporations to our communities, and also because local supply chains we can't depend on long-distance supply chains anymore, the corporate ones, because they're going to be disrupted by weather and by social upheaval. So we need to develop local self-reliance, and also, there's so many things that go into climate change. I mean, the sequestration of carbons with, organic farming, and that could be a whole other lecture, not for me, but there's so many reasons that this all ties in with climate change. And I realized that I believe that regional self-reliance and basic needs, food, fuel, and fiber, is the common ground between the left and the right. That the right really values the idea of self-reliance, and the left more community, and you put the two together, it's not that far a stretch, to get everybody on board to develop a community self-reliance in these basic needs of food, fuel, and fiber. This is hemp, which we're hoping, now that it's been legalized after 80 years, will become a source for fiber for our clothing, among many other products. So we have 6 coalitions all together now. One is the Local Food Coalition, and we're focusing in on grains because we feel that grains has been somewhat overlooked, there's been a lot of advances made in produce and animal products and meats and so on, but not in grain. So we're focusing on developing local supply chains. That's the main function of All Together now, is to catalyze local supply chains. So connecting the heritage grain farmers with the mills, with the bread companies, and with the local brewers for grains. Then we have the Industrial Hemp Coalition, and this is a hemp house. One of our members made out of hemp. It's called hempcrete, like concrete, only it's a little bit of a misnomer because it's not as strong as concrete, but it is mixed with lime, and it's an amazing material because it continually hardens because it's lime and hemp, so it gets harder with time, so it becomes stronger and stronger, and it also continues to absorb carbons, the CO2, into the insulation. And that's when we had a meeting out at a hemp farm, and this is a meeting we just had day before yesterday of our local supply chain. So we have growers, we have, this fellow is the head of research at Thomas Jefferson University, and his students are researching uses for hemp, like what could the end usage be, like plastics, for instance. Then we have someone from Rodell Institute. We had one of our meetings there, and they're doing hemp trials. In fact, this farm where we were is in partnership with Rodell, so they're experimenting with different fertilizers and different growing techniques to see what's the best way to grow hemp. And we have entrepreneurs and CBD oil people, and so that's what we're starting off, is just convening, getting everybody together that have shared values, and seeing if we can make connections to I'm sure, like in New York, the same thing is happening, but large corporations, multi-state corporations, are coming in trying to monopolize the hemp industry and the marijuana industry. So we're trying to prevent that. Or other related coalition is the Plant Medicine Coalition. We want to normalize, originally we were going to call this Adult Use Recreational Cannabis Coalition, but then we thought it would scare some people off. So we wanted to normalize cannabis as a medicine. So we started a Plant Medicine Coalition, and it's not just cannabis, of course, we have other traditional plant medicine, herbs and so on. So this is our beginning of our Plant Medicine Coalition, and one of the things we just are developing now is this program there's a nonprofit that has a community kitchen that's open to entrepreneurs to do product development. So we're going to do a local supply chain with, this is hemp, this is a hemp farmer who also makes the CBD oil, that he's going to supply it to these entrepreneurs who are doing product development and edibles for CBD oil. And eventually, once marijuana is legalized in Pennsylvania, they'll also be doing edibles for marijuana. Because one of our purposes is to make sure that the communities that have been wronged and harmed by the U.S. war on drugs, have an opportunity in this new industry, in hemp as well as marijuana. So that's a big part of what we're trying to do in terms of our rural-urban connections is just what's happening here. And our hemp farmers are very excited about this. Like we're looking for ways in which we can connect with the entrepreneurs in the city. So then, of course, we have a renewable energy coalition, and it's just starting as well. But the man who owns this industrial array, Community Energy, is called, in Lancaster County. That's where I buy my electricity through a third-party supplier through the grid, comes from there. And he also was the one that sold me wind energy back when I first became 100% renewable at the White Dog. He told me the other day that I was his first customer, which I didn't know. And then now that was over 20 years ago, and now he's into solar. And he's one of the biggest, local producers of solar. I think maybe he's the biggest. And then the other first member of our coalition owns a company that puts solar on rooftops, and he also installed my rooftop solar. And so I think we're going to, in each of the coalitions, we're focusing on a particular project, and I think this one looks like it will be about charging stations for EVs, to pass legislation in the state to get charging stations. I mean, believe it or not, we don't have charging stations for EVs in the turnpike. So I know in New York and Massachusetts and New York, you're all set up. I have an EV myself, and I can drive it in these states and find charging stations at all the throughways. But in Pennsylvania, believe it or not, you go to the filling station on the turnpike and they don't have chargers for EVs. It's horrible. So anyway, that's what we're working on in that coalition. And then this one, the Zero Waste Coalition, we have a fantastic fellow. There's a coordinator for each of these coalitions, and at this point they're all volunteers. And this fellow moved here from Minneapolis because his wife got a job teaching at Swarthmore, and so that brought him to the neighborhood. But he started a national model called Eureka, recycling company in Minneapolis. And his philosophy is that every municipality should deal with their recycling in place. That the days of putting recycling on a boat and sending it to someone else's country or trucking it to our low-income neighborhoods and burning it, we can't do that. We have to figure out in each municipality, how to deal with our waste, which begins with, ordinances about, bottle ordinances, plastic bag ordinances, all that kind of stuff to reduce the waste in the first place. But then to separate it properly and find businesses, start businesses in every community that can actually use the products there in that place instead of shipping it all over. So I'm very excited about him. And we're going to pick one small town in Pennsylvania, probably either Swarthmore or Media, where we have friends to do a model project, on zero waste. And then the last one is local culture and tourism. And here we want to encourage our city people to patronize the businesses in our rural areas instead of always going to New York or Paris. I mean, I have a friend that goes to Paris 4 times a year. Why not go to Jim Thorpe, PA? It's a beautiful town. With the farm-to-table restaurants and local breweries, and that's what we're hoping for when marijuana becomes legalized in our state, to have vertical businesses. So a farm can grow the marijuana, process it, and sell it on their farm, so that, like wine country in California, that will happen in Pennsylvania as well, to revitalize some of these towns. But we have such a beautiful state, and so that's another area we want to work on. And then we also want to celebrate and educate. So we're, like I say, we're just starting out, so we haven't done a major event yet. We have one planned for the fall of 2020, a climate fest. And so each of our coalitions will do the content. It's going to be a music festival, local beer and all that, and then we'll have a tent for each of the coalitions. So there'll be a hemp tent, and we'll have electric cars on display, and so on. And then one of the most important things we're doing is to change our value system, that all of those in the coalition, the business people and so on, that we need to change our measure of success away from money to the health and well-being of our communities and ecosystems. So that when we have an economic transaction, whether we're a business person or an investor or a consumer, that we need to think about how that economic transaction is going to affect other people and our ecosystem. And we've been really conditioned in our culture to feel like we're fools, if we don't get the lower price, and that we're, or if we don't make the highest profit, or get the best return on our investment. We're all conditioned that that's what we think about, and that it's only the stupid fools that don't get this. We need to turn that around. It's not about maximizing profits, it's about maximizing well-being. And so we're trying to model that in our coalitions and talk about that whenever we have the opportunity. And then local investing is going to be a big part of this. This is a project that one of our members is doing to finance greenhouses for our local farmers to extend the growing season. So he has a food business called Philly Food Works, and he actually gets investments from his customers and invests with the farmers to grow these greenhouses. And we're going to be building that fund, and then also having a pitch night. So once we're up to speed and we have hemp businesses, they're ready to get investors, and marijuana businesses, once that's legalized and so on, to have a night to present and get local investment in these businesses. And another project of mine, the second one, is called the Circle of Aunts and Uncles, and it's a microloan fund where we loan money to low-income entrepreneurs in Philadelphia that don't have a family and friend stage capital. We've loaned up to $12,000 for 3 years at 3%, and then it's managed by a local CDFI. So in the beginning, I didn't know anything about investing. In the beginning, I was going to collect all the checks. The aunts and uncles are all my friends. We had 40 of them. And so I was just going to manage all the money myself. I would have gone nuts if that had happened, but luckily I have a friend that runs the CDFI, and she said, Judy, I can do the loan fund for you. And so I didn't realize what a gift that was. But this is Dolly's Boutique. You're getting a check there. But we have 40 aunts and uncles, and the initial contribution is $2,000, and then it's $1,000 a year in dues. And then on top of that, we provide social capital. So each we start off with we meet in each other's homes, in the aunts and uncles' homes. So we have a dinner together. So we try to create a family-like atmosphere. So it's to have the entrepreneurs understand that we're there not to critique them or judge them, and it's not a competition. We're there to, as aunts and uncles, to support them, so that they feel that they can tell us what their problems are, so we can help them. So we start off with dinner and wine and everything, and then afterwards we form a circle, and then the entrepreneurs present to us, and we vote on their loans. And then we form a circle, a small circle around each entrepreneur. So after we make the loan, then I say, okay, who wants to be on Little Pop Shop's small circle? And so this is a small circle for Little Pop Shop. And Julie Wong has this great. She makes these incredible popsicles. I mean, a popsicle sounds like it's kind of a stupid thing, but they are so good. Like the ones that's most popular right now is a sweet corn pop that's made from corn, and she puts cream in them, and they're all from pastured cows, local cows, and all the fruit and vegetables come from local farms, and they're just incredible. I mean, I ate 7 of them. She brought them for samples when she was applying for the loan, and I just kept eating it. And she was in awe of how much I could eat. They're so good. And the green tea mochi is my favorite one. It has like this mochi ball in it, and the chocolate. Oh my God, it's chocolate with salted caramel in it. It's just spectacular. And so we're having a lot of fun with this little shop. And we had a Little Pop Shop night, it was in January because we just had given her loan in December, and it turned out to be the coldest day of the whole year. Remember that really cold day? And that's when we had our Little Pop Shop one night. So we're all eating these pops on the coldest day of the year, but they tasted just as good. So we made 21 loans to 17 entrepreneurs, totaling $167,500, and we're just started our 5th year. So we've loaned to a butcher, a baker, and 3 ice cream makers. Here's our butcher, a woman butcher on the left, Primal Supply Meats. We loaned her $12,000 to buy an electric saw. She had been sawing the carcasses by hand with a hand saw, so we bought her electric saw for that purpose. And she's just doing great. She now has a bricks-and-mortar butcher shop, which is just beautiful. It's all white and red towel. So we're very proud of her. This is Pete from Philly Bread, and he buys his grains from local heritage grain farmers. All three of our ice cream companies buy from local dairy farms. And we feel like when we give a loan to these entrepreneurs, we're helping the farmers as well, develop these local supply chains. That's another of our ice cream owners. Blue has a coffee shop, and this is so unusual for a coffee shop that not only does she have fair trade coffee and tea, but she has fair trade sugar, local pastured cream, grass-fed cream, and she serves salads and sandwiches, and all that comes from local farms. So it's an inner city coffee house, so it's a really remarkable place. This was a recent loan to Thane Bauer Cafe. Bauer is the name of a bird, and he's just so proud he won an award because he has a charcuterie shop in his coffee shop. It's kind of an odd combination, and some people were critical of it, but then he won an award. And his meat actually comes from Hudson Valley. He has a friend that buys pastured meat and makes the sausage and salami and all that stuff. This young woman has a store where she prints on t-shirts. In fact, here, I'm not going to flash you or anything, but this t-shirt that says "End Mass Incarceration." She made that on a recycled t-shirt that she prints, and that's kind of exciting, you know. And then she also takes old clothes and takes them apart and creates new garments from old clothes. It's called Grant Boulevard, and she employs formerly incarcerated women. This is a Brazilian brother and sister, Lobo Ma. It means the bad wolf in Portuguese. And I'm picking out a jacket I'm going to buy. This was at the meeting when they presented. And then we have crowd shopping days. So this was a crowd shopping day at Lobo Ma, where all of our members come, and we get all of our friends to come, and we give them wine and cheese and so on. And Lobo Ma had $4,000 in sales in 2 hours from all of our aunts and uncles and friends, and we've done that 3 years in a row. So we feel that we get so much collective joy, you know, from working together towards a shared vision for our city, and that with our entrepreneurs that we're co-creating a sustainable and inclusive local economy for the Philadelphia region. So in the end, you know, we all belong to the vibrant community of life on Earth. We're all part of the web of life, and when we feel that connection, we feel the suffering of the pigs. We feel the suffering of the animals and people that are being affected by climate change, the struggling of the small farmers, and so on. And I think the most important thing is that we lead with love. That opening our hearts is really what it's going to take to evolve as human beings. When I made that decision to share my information, my supply list, you know, with my competitors, I was actually afraid when I first thought of that. I thought, but you can't do that, you know. I was afraid that you know, my sales would go down, my profits would go down, that my market niche would no longer be mine or whatever. And I didn't figure out in my head, hey, that's the right thing to do. I felt it in my heart. It was my love of the pigs. I love the pigs, and that's why I did it, you know. And that's what really, it's protecting what we love is what gives us energy. You know, our love of place, you know, our love of community, of local farms, and so on, is where the energy comes from. And that, you know, nature continually creates the conditions for more life. So nature does, just over and over again, and that's how we've all evolved. That's how, the evolution of the universe is all about better and better conditions for life. Now human beings are doing the opposite. That we're creating the conditions, you know, for disaster and for death. Really, we're killing the soil, we're killing the oceans, we're killing the wildlife, and so we need to live in a way that creates the conditions for more life. So if we make it, if we create a viable future for our children and the children of all species, it's going to be because human beings have finally found our place in the web of life. You know, no longer as exploiters, but as lovers. So all together now, together we can build regional economies that work for all people and for nature too. So 1, 2, 3, all together now. All together now. So thank you very much.
Judy. That's really wonderful. Are you open to questions? Yeah. Does anyone have, are there any questions for Judy?
Statements.
Statements are fine too.
Well, I want to bring to you an issue that has been an issue of mine for a long time, and that is the problem of the word consumer. And it's a hard one to tackle, so hard, but it means a very bad thing. And it derives from, first of all, the word itself means, its first meaning is absolute destruction, is complete.
Oh, if you consume everything.
It means that. It means the total destruction. The use up. So the consumption, the disease
Yeah.
is about the destruction, the absolute destruction of the lungs. And it came into use, is my understanding, in this culture, because when people who used to be customers became weaker than the merchants, because the merchants became corporate entities and industries. Those corporate entities wanted people to be destroyers. And that's what we did become. So we destroy matter so that it can be made again.
Yeah.
Because that is the state of our economy, and it's
Yeah.
been that way for a long time. So I want to see some way to deal with that and stop using that word except as a term of derogation.
Yeah. So what would be a better word? A customer?
Well, customer is the old.
Yeah, it's an old fashioned.
It is old-fashioned because we don't use it anymore.
Right.
There's no, all we want is consumers
Right.
is one thing, all
Right.
using up everything.
Yeah.
Great.
Right.
That's the great ideal. So it's a term of disgrace,
Yeah.
and I just want to bring it to your
Okay,
words, too.
great. I'll start using
Customer is a fine word.
Right. Because the customer is such an important part of this.
Exactly.
So we have to identify
And they
that.
have to be equal.
Yeah.
Customer feels equal. Consumer is gospel.
Yeah.
What?
Okay.
What is it?
So I never thought about it that way. I mean, over-consuming, like I do with brownies or something.
Consume means to destroy others.
Right.
That's the first meaning.
Yeah.
So overconsume, you're overeating. First
There you go.
I think the word eating can serve in a lot of places. In the case of
Yeah.
Consumer.
Okay. That's right. Thank you for that tip.
I think we had a question here.
Thank you. Hi, Judy. I'm Marguerite Rigoglioso, and we emailed about me having written the article about White Dog for Mal Warwick's book back in 2005. Anyway, that's me. Thank you so much for all of the work you're doing. It's a tangential but related. I feel like I have to take a big breath after hearing everything that you're doing. It's truly, truly extraordinary. And how, in the wake of all of this impending and urgent stuff that's coming down, how do you keep balance in your life and not get consumed yourself by being in all of these different groups? Because I think it's relevant to those of us who want to be part of it and not want to blow out our adrenals in doing so.
Right. Well, that's a good question because I tend to. I'm terrible at self-care, and when we're talking about balancing masculine and feminine energies and how masculine is about efficiency, sometimes I catch myself. I have too much masculine energy, and and especially when it comes to self-care, I'll say, if I brush my teeth just once a day, I'd have extra time to work more. And I actually, one time in my life, I stopped changing my socks because I thought that's a waste of time to change your socks. You can't even see if they're dirty or not. So I didn't change my socks for like weeks or months or whatever, until I got athlete's feet. And then I realized why people do wash their socks. Anyway, so that's something I have to keep reminding myself. I guess for me, the main way I seek balance is through nature. Like I mentioned, that I have this cabin in the Poconos, and I try to get there as much as I can and have some moments of stillness. I have a little, what I call my morning bench, and my little flower garden that Janine Martin have been in, where I just go and sit in my flower garden and watch the butterflies and bees and listen to the wind in the trees. And you know, when I get to my place in the Poconos and I go out into the woods, when the wind blows, to me it sounds like a clapping of hands, and that the nature is saying to me, Judy's back, and they're clapping with them, you know, coming back into the woods, you know. So that's kind of like how I recharge, or whatever you want to say. But I have to admit, I am somewhat of a workaholic, and I've been like that since I was a little kid. My mother, you know, she used to give me, I'd ask her for all the junk mail, and I'd sit at this little table in the kitchen when she was cooking, and I'd just shuffle through papers and write things on them, and she called it my beeswax. This is my beeswax. So I always liked that. I love to work, and you know, even as a child, that's what, instead of playing house, I played business person, shuffling my papers, you know. But it is, I'll say, like, my one life regret, and I only have one, luckily, is that I didn't spend more time with my children when they were little. And, you know, when I just can't believe that I missed that time in my life. I mean, I was with them. They were we lived above the restaurant, so they knew where I was, and I was running up and down the stairs, and so were they. But I didn't have this quiet time where I just focused on my kids. And so that's very related to all this, that I get into this work thing, and that just consumes my life. So it's a very good point. And well, I'm hoping that help is on the way in terms of altogether now, as I mentioned, it's all volunteer. But first of all, I'm 72, so you know, I can start to tell now a little bit of aging in terms of my mental capacity, that I don't have quite the same ability to handle multiple things and connections. Like I'll say, well, I got to introduce that person, this piece can connect here, and that kind of stuff. I used to have it all up here in my mind and could do that, and now I have to write everything down, but then I can't find my papers. So I need to pass on this work to younger people, and most of the people that I'm working with are young. And that's another thing that I feel so strongly about. I was talking about last night with the Place Corps people, is that we need intergenerational connections in order to bring forward transformative change. Yeah, we're not going to make it without that. And you know, it really burns me up when people my age, all they do is go on tours. They just travel all the time, like one after another. Where did you go? You know, and it just, you know, so you can't. I mean, that's one of the reasons I started the Circle of Aunts and Uncles. And I thought, well, I'm going to try this and see what they say. So I asked all my friends to join, and they I only asked the ones I knew could afford it, and they all joined. And no one said no, because I think they were actually looking for ways to get engaged. So that's what I'm hoping with all together now. I'm not quite ready to. We're doing kind of a public unveiling our website and all that in October, and I'm hoping that I can get more people engaged in this, including people my age. When I was young, we didn't have much hope for working with our parents because it was during the Vietnam War. The generations were at odds with each other. But now I feel such a relationship, a connection with people that are in their 20s and 30s and 40s. I feel that really strongly, and that's who I mostly work with. And they like working with me. You know, well, maybe they want to be around an old lady, but, you know, but we have a lot of fun. I just had a retreat up in the Poconos with my Health Coalition folks, and we just had a blast. And they were all my kids' age. But anyway, I just really believe strongly that we need that intergenerational alliance to do what has to be done. And so I don't know how I got on that, but anyway. Another question? Yeah.
I have a question. I think a lot of what you're talking about is happening in the Hudson Valley in an amazing way. So much of what you're talking about, but we don't have, I don't think yet, a kind of a model to bring it all together. And I was wondering if you have something like that you online or that you can share.
Well, this will soon be online. I'm trying to get everything ready. I don't want to announce the website until I get everything on it that I want to do. So this is exactly that. This is a way of bringing together, you know, because you see all these, you see your renewable energy people over here, and your local food people over here, and so on, and your community capital people, whatever. How can we put them all together into one big effort, you know, and all together, have this feeling of all together now, and the urgency of that. So I'm not I'm not inventing all this stuff, I'm just bringing the energy together and identifying the leaders in each of these areas and convening, and seeing, what comes of these things, the projects that will come from it. So, this is all together Pennsylvania, but it would be great if they were all together New York or all together Ohio. So we are trying to create a model that's replicable. Always looking for ideas too. I mean, I know the Hudson Valley is ahead of us, just a little bit I've been here. I want to come back because there's so much. I want to bring my hemp coalition to see Hudson Hemp, because I've never seen anything like it. Abby just took me there today, and it was just amazing. And so I want to show the folks back home. So there's a lot we can learn between the states as well.
Yeah, especially I like the part where you said that the people that were your top employees became owners in the different businesses.
Yes, the Zingermans.
And so a model of that type of business will be in there as well. Right?
Yeah, I mean, that would be great. I mean, I think that cooperative ownership, certainly the work that we're doing with the inner city to help young entrepreneurs there to prepare to get licenses and cannabis licenses. The best hope for them is cooperatives to pull money together. And actually, right now with the hemp, we see that the bottleneck in Pennsylvania is processing. Like, we have so many growers, hundreds of growers. We made a big map of Pennsylvania and got all the hemp permits, since we have them on a map, and see where they all are. But we don't have processors yet, and there's no. There are a couple very small CBD processors, but there's no fiber processors. So one idea we have is to start a farmers cooperative, that the farmers would own the processor. So I do believe that cooperatives are going to play a huge part, in this work. Yeah, thanks. Yes.
I think in thinking about regional self-reliance, you made me realize that something that we, at least I ingest on a daily basis, is the news, and that actually comes from a very much international and global supply chain. And so I guess I'm wondering, given how vast your vision is, do you have any suggestions about how we could sort of make or convert our national news into more regionally based? How do we apply the same kind of thinking to another sort of monoculture or intellectual monoculture?
Yeah. Well, at Bali, I sort of started off with the same idea there, with having these building blocks of regional economies, and one of them was media. And I totally agree with you that just like we're decentralizing food systems, we're decentralizing energy systems, that we also have to decentralize news. And it's a crying shame that a lot of the small local papers are going out of business. The Philadelphia Inquirer is in jeopardy. Though if I'm going to grab one paper, I often grab the New York Times and see what's going on. When I read the Inquirer, I find things in there that are so important to me that I could never read the New York Times because they're local. And so I don't, and it's a big problem. We want to do more communication. In fact, I'm right now trying to hire somebody to work with me on just the communication part of it, that would follow me around. Like, my daughter said to me, I hope you're recording all this, Mom. And I told her I went out to this farm where the fellows, growing hemp and then making CBD oil and so on, and he was showing me how. She said, did you film that? And I said, no. And she said, well, you've got to film that and put out blogs and stuff. And I realized that that's true. And so a big part of Altogether now is going to be, education, and I need to hire a media person. So we're about ready to apply for funding. So we're hoping that we'll be able to hire a professional staff, because that's the other problem for me, is that everybody's volunteer. And so, we're doing so much. I had to get to a certain point to show what I was trying to do before I could apply for money. So that's going to happen soon, and that's going to be an important part of it, really, is the communications and the education. Any other questions? Yes?
Do you envision the coalitions becoming like a nonprofit, or there's just...
Yeah.
So the coalition right now is just volunteers and different, whatever, entities, whatever their role is.
Yeah.
And so then...
Yeah, well, okay, so the details are, when I started this, I called it Proud Pennsylvania. But then I realized that I had to separate my political work from the nonprofit work, or I couldn't get funding. Like the 501c3, you can't do political work. So Proud Pennsylvania now is the political work. And so altogether now, I'm just now incorporating and then, applying for the 501c3. So that will be, so then I'll be able to raise money for that, separate from the political work.
And so all these coalitions will be under this all together?
Yes.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, the 6 coalitions are sort of the pillars within altogether now. Yeah. And so I hope to hire someone to head each of those coalitions. And their job would really be to convene the people, just as we're doing now on a larger scale, to convene people in that particular industry and find the connections and actually helping to build the local supply chains. Like just little things, like right now, I told my local store about local CBD. I said, you don't need to get CBD from California. We make it in Pennsylvania. There are 4 CBD makers in Pennsylvania. They're all great. Here's their names, So once we get a little larger and have someone just assign to that, it's really about building those local supply chains. So we're not shipping CBD with all those carbons from California when we can make it here and employ our people and our small farmers. And we want to have Pennsylvania hemp be like, is this Pennsylvania hemp? But it's so new. I mean, the problem with hemp is that it's been illegal for 80 years, and so the farmers don't know how to grow it. There's no processing equipment. The banks are afraid of it. People can't get funding. So it's really like starting from scratch.
Where was it that the students were doing research for how to use hemp?
At Thomas Jefferson University.
Okay.
It used to be called Philadelphia University, and they merged.
Okay.
And Ron Kander is the scientist that oversees that program. And our next hemp coalition meeting is at the university. That'll be our 5th meeting. Because we realize that at the end you need to have a market, that the farmers need a market, the processors need a market. So we want to explore how we can create businesses that create the market, local markets, for the hemp. So that's what we're focusing on in our next meeting. Yes?
I wanted to say that one of the biggest problems that I've had, I'm a small local business and I produce CBD from products from hemp grown by, it's disappeared, Hudson Hemp. So one of my biggest problems you've just hit on, which is that although I work collaboratively and try and involve as many different people as I possibly can in growing a business from, which I've done in a year, from 2 products to 9 and almost 10 this year, my biggest problem is either financing or insurance, because people, CBD and it's hemp, oh my gosh, it's drugs, and therefore it's almost impossible to get funding or even to get a payment gateway for my products on the internet. I can say though that through a very strong collaborative situation, really here in the Hudson Valley, I found that my products and my company is growing organically in spite of all the difficulties that come up, because it's sort of word of mouth. But it has been terrific to find like-minded souls who want to work collaboratively, and it's very much in essence here. It's very much a part of what goes on. So I'm a part of what goes on here on a day-to-day basis in this particular area. So it's exciting, and thank you for what you're doing too. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for comments. Okay, I think that's it, right? Here's what you.
Thank you. We've got some of your books here. They're available for purchase and signing. And we also have a milk and cookies reception here as well.